The day had begun like any other at Crestwood High School, with the hallways buzzing with students rushing between classes, laughter bouncing off lockers, and the faint smell of cafeteria food lingering in the air. But for one student, everything was about to change in ways no one could have predicted. Her name was Anna, a quiet, studious girl with a love for writing that exceeded even her passion for schoolwork. She carried her worn backpack carefully, making sure not to let the books inside be damaged, and her journal, where she chronicled her thoughts and dreams, rested closest to her chest. As she navigated the crowded corridor, a group of students noticed her and smirked, whispering amongst themselves. They had always singled her out, mocking her for her appearance, her voice, and now her ever-present journal. Anna had learned to ignore them over the years, to retreat into the sanctuary of her imagination when reality became too harsh. But today, the cruelty would take a bold and destructive form. The group of bullies grabbed her backpack, yanking it from her shoulder with shocking strength. Her books spilled onto the floor, pages bent and crumpled, but it wasn't the textbooks they cared about. It was the small black journal that had always been her most prized possession. One of them snatched it, flipping through the pages carelessly, their laughter echoing like a cruel soundtrack to her growing panic. "What's this, your little diary?" a boy sneered, tossing it aside. Another, with a wicked grin, tore the journal in half, scattering the remnants across the linoleum floor. Anna froze, her chest tightening, tears threatening to spill. She had always known she would face teasing, perhaps even exclusion, but she had never anticipated this public desecration of her creativity, the destruction of her personal world, in front of everyone she knew. As whispers and chuckles filled the hallway, her friends stood frozen, unsure whether to intervene, their hesitance reflecting a reality many had faced: the fear of standing against bullies who thrived on attention and power. The bell rang, signaling the start of first period, yet no one moved to help, the chaos fading as students reluctantly returned to their classrooms, leaving Anna alone amidst the ruins of her work. It was in this moment, heart-pounding and tear-streaked, that she realized the confrontation had grown far beyond mere physical aggression. It had become a challenge to her identity, her voice, and her passion. Little did the bullies know, the story written in that journal was more than words on paper. It was a story that would ultimately turn the tables, exposing truths that would ripple far beyond the walls of Crestwood High, shaking the very foundations of the social order that allowed cruelty to go unchecked. Anna picked up the torn pieces of her journal, her fingers trembling, the ink smudged from the careless hands of her tormentors. Each page she tried to straighten revealed the depth of her work, her creativity spilled across the torn lines, yet her resolve began to solidify like a quiet flame refusing to be extinguished. Her English teacher, Mrs. Callahan, noticed her distress and approached cautiously, her kind eyes scanning the scattered pages. "Anna, what happened?" she asked gently, kneeling to help collect the fragments. Anna explained, her voice breaking, recounting the relentless bullying and the destruction of her journal. Mrs. Callahan's expression shifted from concern to something far more determined, and she encouraged Anna to consider a bold step: to reclaim her story not as a private diary but as a powerful work of literature that could be shared with others. The idea was revolutionary, and at first Anna felt hesitant. How could the story that lived quietly in her hands possibly survive in the harsh, judgmental world outside her imagination? But as she considered the possibility, a spark ignited within her. The bullies had tried to silence her, to diminish her, yet the act of writing and sharing her work could transform the pain into strength. Over the next few weeks, Anna poured every ounce of her energy into restoring the torn pages, retyping them, editing, and rewriting sections that had been mangled or lost. With each keystroke, she reclaimed pieces of herself, building a resilience that would later astonish everyone who had doubted her. She worked after school, late into the night, often in solitude, guided by the memory of her destroyed journal and the resolve that no act of cruelty could define her worth. As she completed the manuscript, she felt a quiet triumph. This was her voice, unbroken and resilient, and she decided it deserved an audience far beyond the walls of her school. Word began to spread, quietly at first, about a student at Crestwood High who had written a book that captured the raw, unfiltered experiences of adolescence, resilience, and identity. Teachers whispered among themselves, intrigued and inspired by the maturity and depth displayed in her work. Students who had once ignored her now approached cautiously, curiosity gleaming in their eyes. And the bullies, who had destroyed her journal, began to sense a shift in power. The narrative had changed. No longer could they define her by ridicule and humiliation. She was authoring her destiny with every page, every word, every sentence. When the manuscript was finally completed and submitted to the principal for consideration, in the school's literary magazine, it carried more than a story. It carried a testament to perseverance, courage, and the unyielding human spirit. The principal, Mr. Harmon, a man known for his strict policies but also for his appreciation of genuine talent, received the manuscript with measured curiosity. He had seen countless submissions over the years, but none resonated with the authenticity and depth of Anna's work. He read through pages detailing experiences of alienation, perseverance, and the subtle cruelty that often hides in the ordinary routines of high school life. The prose was sharp, insightful, and above all, deeply moving. The principal made a decision that would forever alter the social dynamics of Crestwood High. He would present the work to the entire school not as a student project, but as the novel written by the student herself. The announcement was scheduled for a school-wide assembly, and when the day arrived, whispers and murmurs filled the auditorium. Students speculated wildly, some mocking, others curious, but none could have predicted the effect the announcement would have. As Mr. Harmon introduced Amara and her work, he praised her courage, creativity, and the way she had transformed personal hardship into literature that could inspire others. Then, in front of a silent crowd, he revealed the truth. The girl whose journal had been torn, whose personal struggles had been publicly mocked, was in fact the author of the book now being celebrated. The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Shock rippled through the auditorium as students recognized the very girl they had tormented as the mind behind the powerful words on display. Some of the bullies looked away, shame replacing the arrogance that had fueled their actions, while others whispered to one another, unable to process the reversal of power. Anna stood on stage, hands shaking but heart steady, realizing that the very act of creation she had once considered private had become her shield and her sword. By writing, by persevering, she had asserted control over her narrative, transforming humiliation into acclaim. The applause that followed was not just a recognition of literary talent, it was a collective acknowledgement of resilience, of triumph, over cruelty, and of the undeniable strength that comes from refusing to let others define who you are. The assembly ended, but the ripples of that moment would echo far beyond the walls of the school, teaching a lesson that could not be erased, that courage, integrity, and creativity possess a power that no act of bullying can destroy. In the days that followed, Anna's life transformed in ways she had never anticipated. The students who had once sneered at her began approaching her with respect, and some even asked for advice on their own writing projects. Teachers offered mentorship. Local authors reached out, and invitations to literary events began arriving. Even the local newspaper took notice, publishing a story about the young girl who had faced public humiliation and emerged not just unscathed, but empowered. The book itself garnered attention for its unflinching honesty, its portrayal of adolescence, and the insightful commentary on social dynamics, bullying, and personal growth. Yet amidst the accolades, Anna remained grounded, remembering the raw emotions that had driven her writing in the first place. She knew that her journey had not just been about achieving recognition. It had been about survival, identity, and reclaiming a voice that had been threatened. The bullies, who once derived power from her perceived weakness, were now confronted with the consequences of their actions in a way that words alone could not convey. They had underestimated her, and the revelation that they had once torn the book of someone who would soon captivate the community left them grappling with guilt, disbelief, and a reluctant admiration. The experience became a lesson not just for the students involved, but for the entire school community. Cruelty may seem immediate and potent, but resilience, courage, and the act of creation possess a far more enduring influence. Anna's story became a symbol, a beacon of hope for those who felt marginalized or powerless, demonstrating that the act of believing in oneself and pursuing one's passions relentlessly could transform not only personal circumstances, but the perspectives of everyone around them. Yet the journey was not without its challenges. Anna continued to face moments of doubt and fear, particularly when confronted with the remnants of past hostility. Some students who had observed the events with jealousy or resentment whispered behind her back, while others struggled to reconcile their admiration for her with their own insecurities. But each challenge reinforced her resolve, teaching her that the act of creation and the courage to stand publicly in one's truth required ongoing commitment. She began workshops for younger students, sharing her experiences and encouraging them to explore their own creativity as a means of personal empowerment. Her story became a lesson plan in empathy, resilience, and the transformative potential of literature. Even the school administration recognized the broader educational value of her work, integrating discussions of her book into classes about writing, ethics, and social responsibility. As Anna navigated this new phase of her life, she found herself becoming not only a writer but a mentor, a guide, and a symbol of resilience for those who might otherwise remain voiceless. The book's impact rippled outward, drawing attention from regional literary communities, and eventually national recognition, validating the power of an individual's story to challenge perceptions and inspire change on a scale far beyond the original school hallway incident. Anna's parents watched with pride and astonishment as their daughter, once quietly battling the cruelty of peers, transformed into a young woman whose words commanded attention, respect, and admiration. They had always known of her talent, her love for writing, but the depth of her resilience surprised even them. They offered unwavering support, ensuring she had the resources, encouragement, and emotional guidance necessary to navigate her burgeoning literary journey. Anna, in turn, maintained a sense of humility, constantly reflecting on the moments that had shaped her, from the fear and humiliation to the eventual triumph and recognition. She understood that her story was not solely her own. It was a narrative intertwined with the experiences of countless others who faced adversity, exclusion, or derision. By sharing her story, she provided a lens through which others could find validation, courage, and the strength to assert their own identities. The principal's decision to publicly acknowledge her authorship had ignited a movement within the school, one that emphasized compassion, the consequences of cruelty, and the inherent value of each student's voice. Anna's journey highlighted a fundamental truth: that even in the face of deliberate harm, human creativity, resilience, and integrity can not only endure, but flourish, reshaping relationships, perceptions, and the very culture of a community. The story of Anna and the torn journal became more than an anecdote within the walls of Crestwood High. It evolved into a testament to the power of resilience, the courage inherent in creativity, and the transformative effect of sharing one's truth. Bullies, once emboldened by ignorance and arrogance, were confronted not with retaliation, but with the undeniable strength of a story well told, the power of a voice that refused to be silenced. students and teachers alike came to recognize that the measure of a person was not in the cruelty they could inflict, but in the grace, intelligence, and perseverance they exhibited in the face of adversity. Anna continued to write, each new project infused with the lessons learned from her experience, and each recognition served not to inflate her ego, but to remind her of the responsibilities that accompany influence. The legacy of that torn journal, once a symbol of vulnerability, became a beacon of hope and inspiration, illustrating that even the most painful experiences could be alchemized into something profound, impactful, and enduring. And as Amara walked through the halls of her school, now no longer afraid of judgment or cruelty, she carried with her the certainty that her voice mattered, her creativity could not be destroyed, and that through courage, perseverance, and authenticity, even a single individual could inspire transformation in a world too often blinded by indifference. Her story remains a lesson for all, that adversity may strike in moments of unguarded vulnerability, but resilience, courage, and unwavering dedication to one's passions can turn even the harshest trials into triumphs that reverberate across time, hearts, and communities alike.